Good day, everyone, and welcome. Welcome back, I hope. Oh, it's been an amazing journey. The energies that I've been experiencing have been very interesting. And I use the word interesting in order to not project or to express the challenges that I have experienced recently. As I've talked about before, there are many things going on in our world right now that most of us, including myself, are unaware of. Like, I'm unaware of perhaps more than others. However, I'm still unaware of much of what's transpiring because every day I have a new video enter my feed, which essentially adds on to what I already know. And sometimes it takes me off on paths that I was unaware of previously. It's like that first time that I watched the movie Matrix and I sat in that theater and I was essentially blown away by the possibilities at that time that I had watched of what our reality truly was. And only later to come to understand that that is the way our reality is. See, I've put together a lot of different pieces of research and information from several different sources. And most importantly, I line them with my intuition, which I believe to be my direct connection to Source, the God of all things, or God overall. And yeah, to understand that we are in a simulation, and not in a sort of a sense, but actual, and that simulation is essentially done with what I understand is overlays, and overlays being, we'll call them virtual projections upon organic reality. And while I can't say that I know all or that I understand all, often when I hear different people speak about things, I'll see or I'll get a good idea in my mind of what that looks like. You see, one of the positive parts to video games is video games showed us a lot of things that could be yet weren't because it was a video game, as opposed to movies would have to keep it within the realm of reality, at least until most recently when now they've started using a lot of AIs to create reality for movies. Movies are well, many of the actors are AI recreations. Like, you don't even need the actual real actor any longer. You can just basically use footage and an AI can recreate models in order to give you the illusion that you're seeing that actor at a different age. This first became noticeable when I think it was a Netflix movie came out and they were showing Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, I believe, and a couple other people. They were showing them in their early life, their midlife, and then their older life, and it was easily to see. And I think they even had told about, or talked about it being AI generated. But anyways, my point being is that I've come to understand that the world is considerably different than I ever imagined it to be. And so while I was sitting and thinking about, or perhaps setting up for a talk on reframing, because there was an incident that I had found out that happened earlier this year that's still ongoing and people are still concerned. It has to do with the Amazon warehouse closures here in Canada. And I wasn't even aware of this because, in order to maintain my reality and not become distorted by everything that's happening on in the world, I decided to step away from most news. Definitely all mainstream news. I took a few hours and I actually deleted or chose on YouTube to not recommend anything to do with any news, whether it was alternative news, or when I mean by alternative news, I mean all this talk of aliens and such, and other things, but different people who I had watched previously, as well as the mainstream news, whether it was one side or the other side. I just chose to disregard all of it. in order to, maintain more of a clear idea of what was actually happening in the world. See, there's two things that are happening in the world. There is what you're being told it's happening, and then there's what you see with your own eyes that's happening. And for me, those two things have been considerably far apart from one another. I still live in a reality, for example, that just this previous December 6th, our city spent thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Like I can imagine, like I saw all the workers working, setting up all the decorations, and then they putting on a parade. So I guess I should have finished that sentence. Our city this month spent a lot of money and manpower on creating a free Santa parade. And as I'd mentioned before in a previous podcast, it seems almost every month they're doing something to perhaps, you know, block the negative frequencies, which I'm personally feeling right now that are coming in. And I guess the word negative frequencies is incorrect. It's the challenging frequencies, because it's as if there's an addition of energy into our system. See, one of the things I learned in school a long time ago was that energy is neither created nor destroyed. And I choose to disagree with that on the idea that energy can be added to a system from another system. So if you look at the universe or existence as a whole, sure, there may be only a certain amount of energy, although they have shown us that the universe itself, which is energy, is constantly expanding. So, right there, that little thought that they're saying, that rule of science kind of breaks away. Because when you add energy to a system, that system essentially has to balance itself. And one of the ideas or thoughts that has crossed my mind is that due to all of the solar activity, perhaps, there is a consistent and never ending increase of energy within our system called, well, we call it Earth. Some people call it Gaia, nonetheless, the planet that we live on. And that the experience or the energies that I'm feeling, and they were heavy, they have been heavy, have been a result of this. And then there's the other idea that there are people who are awakening up on this planet. And when I mean awakening up, I mean literally pulling the veil or shredding the veil, because I still feel that portions of the veil are still present. But they're pulling the veil of the matrix, the simulation in which we live in, from their view. And this is causing essentially disturbances within what the balance used to be. So the more people who feel this energy and start to question their reality, start to question why things are the way they are, and to question essentially their so-called leaders, well, this creates more energy and more energy transfers around them, and therefore more, not distortion, but trauma or turmoil within the system. Add to that the ongoing wars, and I'm not just talking about the physical kinetic wars which they show us on TV, that in my opinion a lot of the footage is reused from different things. So there's a lot of propaganda to show us that there is more war, physical war, than than we'd prefer, but then that's actually happening. However, there's also other wars as well. There's energetic wars, there's spiritual wars, there's so many different events going on our planet. And well, that's what I was feeling this weekend. And I got this idea that I wanted to confess that I don't have all the answers. For example, this is my third reincarnation of my channel, New Earth Creations. And I've been asking God, what does he want from this channel? And well, a long time ago, I felt all of the impulses, the ideas, the creative swelling within my right side of my brain. But nonetheless, within my gut, my intuition to create a series called Possibilities where I would do something just like this, except for I would stage each conversation based on a what if. And for example, one of the videos that I did called What If God Created Artificial Intelligence, to do videos, candid videos, more like that. However, I did what I did. I learnt a lot of different things along the road, and I had the channel once and then I brought it down, and then I had the channel again, and then I was through one of these situations where the energies was crazy and other things. I brought that channel down too. And I'm back again doing this third reincarnation of my series, and yet I can still see the censorship. Actually, I asked the YouTube the other day, or yesterday actually. I asked him, they added this on the YouTube studio. They added AI into it, and the AI basically is supposed to help you somehow. So I asked the AI about my channel and about all of my fake subscribers. And I don't mean you who's listening to this. I mean, it says I have 13,000 subscribers, but yet some of my videos struggled to get 40 views. And I don't mean the shorts. The shorts are, well, essentially the shorts are added to the short feed that everyone looks at. And therefore, the odds, you could say, of people stopping on the video that I put up for a short time and therefore counting as a view, well, that's pretty high. However, you can easily see by the average on my channel of less than 10% of people viewing that the subscribers aren't real. And even the AI agreed with me that those subscribers were inactive, but it not necessarily telling me that well, anyways, when I asked if I could remove those subscribers, the AI told me due to privacy concerns they're not able to assist me with that. And but yet they agreed that that is an issue. They gave me different solutions on it, but there is no solution to active bots and inactive bots and inactive counts just sitting there doing nothing. They have said in the videos of how you of what can affect your channel is if they're putting out a lot of images and such into these 13,000 fake subscribers. And actually, I shouldn't say 13. We'll go with 12,000 fake subscribers. Or perhaps they're off-planet subscribers who for some reason can't pretend they're on planet. I don't know. Nonetheless, that when they put out images or they put out impressions, I think they're calling it, when they put out those impressions and nobody responds to it, they stop showing my video. So in a sense, when I advertised on YouTube and I paid them over $1,000 and they gave me all these subscribers and likes that never, ever again viewed one of my videos, that this essentially is held against me. It's held against my channel, and it's part of whatever I would consider as censoring or perhaps shadow banning. I even asked the AI about my shadow banning, and it said, sorry, we can't help you with that. So anyways, yeah, let's get to what we're looking at. And what we're looking at is a painting that I painted 2 or 3 years ago on my wall when I truly began to awaken to the idea that creativity is so powerful and so important. And that's one of the things that I was recommended to by several videos is if I wanted to, you know, I don't know what the right word is. If I wanted to not combat, but if I wanted to balance this energy, and when I mean energy, I mean I can feel people's anxiety and pain, not individually per se, but as a collective. When I was traveling across Canada last summer, I stopped in Winnipeg, and I was in the downtown Winnipeg at nighttime and walking around the streets, which by the way were atrocious. Like the amount of concrete broken on main roads and potholes, and for a stone city like that, there's a lot of concrete in that city, a lot of old buildings, some of them which what I might even say were part of Tartaria. Nonetheless, there was an original old Bank of Montreal, and that actually had the Ukrainian flag at the time rised above several Canadian flags and their own flags, which was pretty interesting. But nonetheless, when I walked around the actual city, I could just feel the depression and the stress and the struggle. Like, I realized it wasn't coming from me because I had no reason to feel that. And that's one of the things that I've worked on constantly, is my ability to discern which energies or which feelings, which ideas are mine and which are not. For example, when you're sitting there and you're doing absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden a negative idea pops into your head, I would say almost always that's an external entity or energy or perhaps a frequency. See, most people, they look at things that happen in movies, for example, and that's part of the reason is to create that distortion, but they see the things that happen in movies and they don't realize that these things actually happen within our reality. For example, I've seen movies where the military is able to use frequencies in order to basically control crowds or to disperse them. So they use sounds and frequencies which cause very uncomfortable situations for people. And then, the crowds go away. Well, little did I know when I saw this in a movie that they actually, and when I mean they, I mean the people who no longer control our world, that they had technology and perhaps have technology. They just don't control us anymore and to the same degree as they once did. But they have control to send frequencies at us, send vibrations, to send sounds and thoughts. Because quite honestly, everything that we've ever thought does hold frequency. I've often said that thoughts are things, the things that we think of, even when we're thinking of them, they're within our field. And if they're within our field, then of course there's other people, because a human brain is both a transmitter and a receiver. It means science has already proven that we only use a certain portion of our brain. And I'll get on to that in a second because I have some interesting things to say about that. But that we only use a portion of our brain. Science also told us that, I think it was 10%, that we use 10% of our brain. Well, a lot of our brain isn't being used because perhaps, there's parts that need to be unlocked. However, there are other portions of our brain that we are using that we blindly believe in and allow science to tell us one thing when our own experience is something different. They say that when we go to elementary school, for example, that's where the critical deletion of our belief in our body it happens. They tell us that things aren't real, things aren't true. And because the parents give, I guess, power over to the teachers, and the teachers actually take their own power. My son once told me that his teacher told me that when he's at home, his parents are in charge, but when he's at the school, the teacher's in charge. And while I agree to being, the leader or the facilitator of education, I do not believe that teachers have any right to tell children or even the parents that their opinion of parenting or educating even the child over them is, right. I believe that there needs to be more of a balance, but nonetheless, we're getting away from what I was originally speaking on. So, where was I originally speaking on? I realized that if I continued down the road that I was with the whole teacher thing, I guess simply because I have unresolved issues, that I would go off on a negative tangent. So let's not go there. Let's get back to good day. Today is a much better day for the energies than yesterday. Like I had said before, the energy that I was feeling from everything around me was very, very thick, I would say. And I could feel it in different parts of my body. But going back to what I was saying before is that we are taught at an early age to dismiss our body, to believe that there's only five senses when actually there are a lot more. And that back to the idea of the brain, our brain has been limited by AI and hijacking of our perception and social programming. And essentially, we have been augmented to dismiss a lot of the things that our bodies tell us, even down to the point where when I was going to school, anyways, I had to put my hand up, or in some cases, there was one teacher who wanted us to write our names on the board when we needed to go to the washroom, and then we could only go in order. And so, see, what that was doing is it was disconnecting us from our body. It was separating our impulse that if we needed to go to the washroom, that we were to listen to our body and to do it immediately. However, we were instructed to, we were forced to hold it, when that was just one part of many when it came to not listening to the truth that our body and then our gut. See, one of the cool things that I learned is we have, as even what science has said, but not necessarily put out in the mainstream, is that we have three brains. And what I mean by that is we have the brain in our brain, obviously. Those have our brain up there. It has a whole bunch of neurons and other things. But what we also do is we have brain cells, those same neurons, just at a less amount, but we have them around our heart area and we have them around our stomach area. And we often talk about having gut feeling. And a gut feeling just means that that brain is telling you something. You know, when we have this love, and I don't mean lust love, I mean love for someone, and perhaps we walk away, we make a mistake, we do something to harm them or whatever, and then we have this impulse to turn around and, face what we're doing. Well, that's our brain and our heart perhaps speaking. And I say perhaps because I'm not speaking or telling truth, I'm truth seeking. That's one of the interesting hashtags I decided to use on this particular video, and perhaps all of my videos in the future, is that I'm truth seeking. I'm a truth seeker. See, as I started off in this video, I said, well, I really don't know. I only have my own experience, and I'm basically putting my experience pieces, or my experience pieces of the puzzle together to try to discern what's actually happening. I'm aware just by my feeling that there is a large amount of chaos within our world. And yet when I look out at my world, I don't see that same chaos. Now I understand there's possible reasons for this. There's possible reasons that some of us on this planet were more isolated by the system, by the matrix than others. That some of us had more perhaps energy that was being harvested, or looshed is another word that's been used. And therefore, those people were more valuable for their production value. See, we used to live in a world where our energy was a commodity. And I don't necessarily only mean the energy that we expel or use up when we do this 9 to 5 draining life that we live. I truly do mean our actual God given Ethereum. I think Ethereum is the right word for that. There's a couple different words that have been added to my vocabulary: Materium, Ethereum, and another one. But it's our Ethereum, our creative energy, our source given energy that comes directly from God that powers us. See, I guess I'm going all over the place on this particular audio, but I'm truly desiring to get more closer to, rather than to tell you what I learned about a year ago or 2 years ago, or there's also the experience of what I'm learning in the moment or each day. As I'd mentioned before, I spent an awful lot of time going through and researching and reading and several other things, and bringing all of this information together, and that's kind of what I want to share. It's not meant to be truth, as I'm truth seeking. It's not meant to be a book where we can get facts from, because honestly, I believe that most people's, or all of us, our realities are different. Not different overall, perhaps at one point in time they were, yet they are different in the fact that whatever we perceive changes. However, our own past experiences changes us. Our upbringing forged us into something that is perhaps different than everyone around us. A really easy case in point is obviously a person who's grown up with a trust fund, or not understanding the value of money because they lived in a rich family. Well, they're going to definitely see the world, perceive the world. Their reality is going to be completely different. One of the big differences between the people who controlled the world and the 99.9% of the rest of us was that they were taught at a young, early age more about the reality of the world. They were taught about manifestation. They were taught about wealth creation. They were taught of, well, they also had their own connections. And you see these movies where these secret society members, they trade their services between each other. They would give them their brothers and sisters within their societies opportunities before they would give anyone. And mostly that would just stay within them. So, of course, they would earn everything and they would keep that within their bloodlines. While at the same time instructing their children at things that most children didn't even or weren't even aware. Not only that, they would be told the truth of perhaps our history, because we aren't, like, when we look at history being 2,000 to 5,000 years old, that's very untrue. Within that same 5,000 years that we talk about, if we were to take like our Georgian calendar, which by the way was changed as well, there used to be a calendar with 10 months as opposed to 12 months. And in that 10 months, March is at the actual number one. Like the word March represents one, April represents two, and then you keep going down, and then you get to Nov, which is 9, and Dec for December, which is 10. The months of January and February were simply added on to our calendar. I don't really fully understand how they did that, but these children of the families which essentially used to run the world. Always want to make sure that I believe that they're currently losing their power, and that's also a large reason why there is so much distortion as well. And that's kind of one of the things that I'm going to be talking about my next audio, which I have scheduled for an hour or so from now, is that particular event, like what's happening in our world that's very positive. But anyways, so the children they're given a higher level of education. They're given a truthful education. So when we come out in the world and we see these political leaders, the CEOs, the Hollywood execs, or the Hollywood elite, and what I mean by that is I mean the people that most of us, many of us anyways, are like all drooling over. All of those people have been given a higher level of knowledge, and I use the word knowledge very specifically, and therefore their ability to succeed is at a higher rate, creating a whole bunch of situations where the rest of us are sitting here in the 8 Mile like environments thinking that I can do it too, and then finding out when we don't, why not? And then going through doubt, and like that, in my opinion, is part of the self-doubt program, getting us to doubt by looking out into the world, onto all the tabloids and newspapers and music videos and movies and interviews and all these award shows, and looking at, well, why can't I be them? And then comparing and contrasting. So much to say, so little time. Well, time's not real, but anyways. So, yeah. Where's the positive message in that? Let me see. Things are changing. And I guess that's the biggest positive reframe of the energy. So although right now it may seem very challenging and very difficult because we aren't and haven't been fully informed of the true nature of our reality. Nonetheless, what's actually happening in our world right now, all mainstream news is propaganda. They tell you what they want you to know to spin the story in a certain direction. And therefore, to rely on getting information from that, it's actually detrimental to us. I once heard a interview from a former reporter, and I don't remember, but she worked for one of the big from the big news people. But she said that there was this red phone in the room, or in the area that what the news was all done from, and occasionally the phone would ring and it would, give instructions of how to beef up viewership, or essentially beef up the amount of fear that was being pushed out. They would tell them to augment or to increase the numbers. I'm sure that you noticed when we were during the 2020 event, you noticed that they spent a lot of time giving you the numbers of something. And when it originally started off, they started off with one number. And I'm being very discreet in this because I'm not really interested in sharing or projecting more fear. But they started off with one set of numbers, and then when that number wasn't high enough, they switched over to another set of numbers, which, was very inaccurate. However, it did increase the amount of fear and hostility. Well, since then, they've kind of outed themselves, and a lot of people don't bother listening to the mainstream news anymore. They recognize that, well, you guys were just wanting me to watch fear porn. You were wanting me to get in a state of fear, and essentially that was and is their purpose. Of course, they had to balance it with positive stories because we would only take so much fear. However, as we start to waken up little to their understanding of things, as we started to wake up, we started taking less fear. And therefore, didn't realize that, and they continued with the same amount of fear. And as they started to realize that they were losing their numbers, they were losing their influence, they thought smartly, or insmartly, depending on whatever, those aren't words, but they thought, well, we should increase the amount of fear. And all they did, fortunately for the rest of us, myself included, is they pushed us away from their fear porn. And they sent us in the direction of the alternative news. And what I mean by alternative news, I mean by most of the channels on Rumble, for example. Many of them are AI and bot created, and they're just going and rehashing, and they're holding on to those people who just stepped out of the fear porn of the mainstream, and they held on to them before they got to any further truth. And yeah, I feel I'm rambling now, so I trust that love is love, and we are all on a journey to find that truth. And like I said, I had the idea of what I'm going to speak about in my next audio, yet I felt compelled just to perhaps just share what I'm doing in the now, because that is the real goal of everything that we're experiencing, is to remain in the now. And we're essentially cutting those tethers and those traumas and those ties to the past, and we're cutting those traumas and expectations and hopes to the future, so that we can actually be in our own balloon and go where we choose to go, and not where we've been told what we should do by our teachers and our so-called leaders, but to be our own individual people and basically chart our own course. So I believe that we're on our way to there, and these podcasts, live streams, these communications, transmissions, which I share with you, well, they're part of my journey and a part of my fractal collective's journey, and perhaps just an expression of my energy, which I understand is going a lot further than my eyes can see. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Yeah, so much to say, but I got a lot of time today to say it. Have a wonderful day and happy ascending.